Hey, good afternoon out in the internet land, wherever you might be listening to us. This is Gabe DeArmond here on YouTube Live with the 573 report. We will bring in Mitchell Forde in just a minute. Want to remind you, as we do at the beginning of the show every week, it is named the 573 report. Well, partly because Columbia is the 573 area code, but also because our presenting sponsor is 573Ts. Their latest offering that I saw on Twitter is a Missouri hockey shirt. I bet you didn't know that was a thing that existed, but they do know it's a thing that existed, and they had a recent dust up with the University of Kansas, and 573Ts has a shirt out based on that. The guys down at 573Ts will, if something happens related to Missouri sports, they're going to have a shirt out related to that within days, if not hours. So make sure you check out all their stuff at 573tees.com. It is nice outside again, so you are allowed to go outside. And if you're in Columbia and want to check out their actual physical location, it's on Alley A between 9th and 10th Street in downtown Columbia. That's about a half block off Broadway. So go check them out there. Either way, wherever you find them, Twitter, on their website, in person, make sure to let them know that we told you to go there and buy all of your clothing for the upcoming calendar year. That would be much appreciated on my part, and it would do good business for their part. We now bring Mitchell Forde into the show, and Mitch, big news. I've got hot takes coming, so get ready. Steve Wilks is leaving to be the Carolina Panthers secondary coach, and here's my take. Okay. Like, I don't know. I fail to, this fails to ignite any great passion in me one way or the other.
Yeah, I think that makes you a bad YouTuber. I think that the first rule of YouTube is you need great passion, even if you don't actually believe it. We need the hottest of takes. I kind of agree. I think that the first reaction is always like, why is this terrible or why is this great? And also in the off season, things are magnified because there's just not as much going on. My thought is, I think Eli Drinkwitz wanted him back that next year. I don't think he was pushed out, because I think if Eli Drinkwitz was going to make a change, he would have done it a lot earlier in the coaching cycle. I also think that Eli Drinkwitz figured this was a possibility, and that is why he went out of his way to point out that Blake Baker would be the number 2 on the staff. And I don't know for sure if he'll get promoted, but it seems likely. And I think that Steve Wilks was fine. But the biggest loss, really, if anything, is probably just the fact that you have to have a third defensive coordinator in 3 years. I think that, that could be a little bit of an issue. Drinkwitz did mention, I guess, was it last week we talked to him? Yeah, signing day. He, continuity and scheme is something that he valued. But for the most part, I don't think this makes or breaks anything.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to a point. I want to be clear. Like, football it's hard. Picking up schemes is not, doesn't just happen in a day. All that, I get it. So I'm not trying to downplay that. But we spent, I guess about 9 months last year saying, well, they're just trying to pick up the scheme, right? You know who tends to pick up schemes better? Better players. Who are, schemes are important. They're not meaningless. But the players who execute schemes well, the ones who are athletic enough and good enough to be in the right place to begin with. Like, sometimes it's not they can't figure it out. Sometimes they just aren't good enough to do it. And it's not whether you're running a 4-3 or a 4-2-5 or a 3-4 or a 2-8 or whatever. It doesn't matter. Just, sometimes the players aren't good enough. There was semi lack of talent, but here's why I just don't really have any huge takes on this. So a year ago, almost exactly a year ago, the whole attitude was, oh my God, he got a guy who's been an NFL head coach. This is going to be so great for recruiting. This is amazing. How could we ever be so lucky to have this guy as the defensive coordinator at Missouri? And then it was 7 weeks of, oh my God, when are we firing this idiot? He has no idea what he's doing. And so now I just can't either think, well, this is the worst thing that's ever happened, or Well, he was obviously pushed out. It's college football, man. They'll have another guy be the defensive coordinator. They'll run a scheme that's probably pretty similar. The guys who are good players were going to be good players under Steve Wilks. They will be good players under the next guy. And the guys who aren't very good or just aren't going to be very good no matter what scheme they're in, and are probably going to lose their jobs. And you're right, like that doesn't play well on the internet. I could never co-host a show with Stephen A. Smith or Skip Bayless. I could not be on talk radio because it just, like, we way overthink all this stuff.
Yeah, I generally agree. I think there's something to, the scheme thing to an extent, because I do think, you were talking about better players make it look better. Like Missouri's players, the same guys at the end of the season played so much better than at the beginning, that it wasn't that they physically couldn't do what they were asked early on. Either they figured out what they were supposed to be doing or what they were being asked to do better or something. There was an adjustment made, and I don't think it was, a change in the scheme, and I don't think it was a change in their abilities. I think it was just that, the coaches said all year, like they were doing the stuff they were asked to do and winning their one-on-ones and stuff like that. But they were clearly capable of doing it all along. So I do think there's something to be said for an adjustment. And I think that, I have known nothing about Blake Baker and his past defenses, but I would think there's a decent chance a good coordinator is going to tailor his scheme somewhat to what, players are used to. And I don't think that the differences in one defensive scheme to another are typically as drastic as a lot of people think they are. Granted, I'm coming to this from a novice perspective. I know there are differences, but I think that people overestimate that sometimes. So yeah, I don't know. I do think it's funny that, I've seen a few people be like, yeah, man, leaving after 1 year, like I get it, but it's just tough, so tough for these kids. And I wanted to be like, well, like, would you have said the same thing if the defense had finished up the season like it did and you wanted him fired? It's like, gosh, that was a terrible defense coordinator, but we can't just do this to the kids that have to learn a new scheme in another year and have to have a new different coach. Like, it's part of college football now. Half the players leave too. It happens.
Right. And that's why we have a transfer portal and a one-time transfer exception. But you kind of brought up a point that leads to what I wanted to talk about next. So there's a lot of this, man, the defense was so much better in the second half. Really? Like, okay, so I'm just going to run through it. You tell me where this great defense showed up. Was it the team that gave up 28 points to Vanderbilt, which may not have scored 28 points the rest of the year? Was it the team that got pasted 43-6 by Georgia and gave up like 300 passing yards to Stetson Bennett? I'll give you the South Carolina game was good. The Florida game against an inept offense was good. Was it the Arkansas game where they gave up 34 and probably could have been 44? I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Yes, it was better than it was in the first half of the year, but that was literally saying, well, it's better than the worst defense in the country. Like, I just, all this defensive improvement in this, and I understand off-season optimism, and I get that this is what fans do, but I saw a lot, even when it was happening, of this defense is getting a lot better, and it got better, but I mean, that's like saying I got a lot taller and one day I'm going to be 5'9" instead of 5'8", dude. I'm still not going to be tall,
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it got better for sure. And the Florida and South Carolina games were good. And like the Arkansas game, I actually thought the defense played fine for as long as it could. It just was on the field every play because Missouri literally couldn't complete a pass. But yes, like I agree. At no point in the year was it like, oh, this defense is nasty, they're going to like win us a bunch of games in the SEC. I agree. When you look at, if you look at last season as a whole on defense, not even close to good enough. And if it had happened in reverse, where like they had a few decent games and then played like they did for the latter half, no chance Steve Wilks sticks around. It just, because of how it happened, you could say, okay, learning curve. He was new. Players were picking up the scheme. But yeah, if you just look at that season as a whole, it was definitely obviously not very good. They were well down past 100 in almost all the statistical categories out of 130 FBS teams.
So I legitimately cannot wait until week 3 of the season, and Missouri's like 62nd in the country in total defense, and it is just an outright celebration of how much Blake Baker or whoever it is has improved this defense. Thank God we got rid of Steve Wilks and sent him off to the NFL and got a guy who has us in the mid-60s in total defense against Abilene Christian and whoever else. So, all right, let's take a couple of football-related questions, then we'll move on to the other sport that's being played. Colby says, does Charlie Harbison come back as a full-time assistant? I mean, we were joking about this beforehand. It would be incredible because it would basically just, the entire announcement from Missouri would have to be, hey, we said there was a personal family situation. He resolved all that in the last 2.5 weeks. He back. Let's go.
Right.
I mean,
yep. Family's good. Football's more important now. I mean, I actually really do think from talking to someone that, Charlie Harbison, everyone always assumes like, oh, parted ways, stepped down from family, that he got forced out. I really don't think that was the case. Eli Drinkwitz really likes him, brought him along with him from Appalachian State, made him the associate head coach. I do think like that was someone he wanted to stay on staff. So like, yeah, I guess there's a small, possibility where he says, oh yeah, Eli Drinkwitz really needs me, I'm going to come back. But I don't think this is something where it's like, oh, Mizzou needs a guy and they're going to call him back up. I assume that his family situation is still similar and he's going to want to, do that, spend time with them. He's also, I mean, he's pretty old. He's in his 60s. So he might just be kind of, weaning out of the football ranks a little, or the everyday coaching ranks a little bit. But yeah, I wouldn't anticipate that.
Well, I don't know why you would assume his family situation was similar to what it was all the way back in January, Mitch. That is a huge leap on your end. So just kind of wrapping this part of it up, like you were saying, there is some alarm to, oh my God, the world's ending. Drinkwitz can't keep anybody. And like, I don't think there is reason for alarm by any means. And Steve Wilks wanted to go to the NFL, but there's been a lot of turnover on this staff. And I don't think it's a reason for alarm. I just think it's at least something to look at and go, I don't know, let's see if this is a deal. Maybe it's just college football. Maybe it's, there's probably an individual explanation. I mean, we've kind of gotten the impression that Aaron Fletcher was encouraged to look elsewhere. We know all the Barry Odom holdovers were encouraged to look elsewhere. Jethro Franklin, clearly a mistake. Wilks, I left for a better job, whatever. You can explain everyone individually. But I'm not saying you got to keep every guy around like Gary Pinkel did for 2 decades. But I do think that it goes back to what we've talked about. The only thing we don't really know if Eli can do is build a program. And I do think people wanting to stick around and passing up other opportunities and some of that, I do think it can play into it. So I'm not in any way saying it's a reason for alarm now. I'm just saying that, like, I could see a situation where 3 years from now we look back and go, oh, yeah, maybe we should have put a little more stock into that.
Yeah, that's my kind of take on it as well. I don't want to predict doom and gloom just because like a bunch of people are leaving, or say Eli Drinkwitz can't hire assistants or he's hard to work with, because like we have no idea. We hardly ever interact with these assistant coaches. I think probably, if I had to guess, it is more of just it's the the culture in college football now. Everyone's moving on all the time. But yeah, it is definitely something that we could look back on and say if Eli Drinkwitz doesn't work out here, that's kind of a big reason why he had no staff continuity. If he was replacing 5 to 7 assistants every single year, that's a hard thing to do for a young head coach who, especially when you're, I would guess it's a little tougher when you're replacing on the side of the ball that you don't coach. If he was replacing guys under him at offense, well, the scheme stays the same. He's still calling the plays. He's still generally doing things the same. Probably a little different when you're replacing the defensive staff essentially 2 years in a row. But again, I'm not pushing the panic button on this yet.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always going to remember the time I made Steve Wilks nearly physically ill in a press conference by asking him about his defense.
That's right. He basically threatened to vomit on us.
He was I don't think he was thrilled about being asked about that 3 weeks later, but we had never talked to him, and I thought it was a valid question. So, all right, one more football question from Kyle. Not sure if this has been addressed already, but if Deshaun Woods has academic issues, how will he be eligible at Wyoming and not Mizzou? And the only thing we can say there is we're not sure he will be eligible at Wyoming. Let's wait and see. And we're not sure he wouldn't have been eligible at Mizzou, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, from what I understand, if he would have been eligible, if he ends up playing next season at Wyoming, he could have played at Mizzou. It's just Wyoming taking a risk Mizzou wouldn't take.
It's a risk management factor. Like, a lot of people don't understand that on signing day, I promise there are kids in Missouri signing class right now that aren't yet qualified and through the NCAA clearinghouse. But the coaches know their situations and they believe that they will make it. In this case, it was a risk that Missouri wasn't willing to take, and Wyoming was, and it may or may not work out for Woods, and we'll see where it goes from here. But that's the situation. AU Stock says, well, I thought we might be talking about a coaching change at Mizzou, but not that coach. So that kind of segues nicely into so I was watching Auburn, Arkansas. It was a really good game. Great atmosphere, NBA players on the court, arena record. Duncan's the game. They shut the lights out. Everybody storms the floor. Eric Musselman rips all his clothes off because that's what happens in Fayetteville when Arkansas wins a game. And then I turn the channel to the SEC Network. I'm like, this doesn't really feel like the same sport to me. Like, what's happening here?
Yeah, that end of the game dunk and the little like twirl onto the Auburn player, I don't know if it was intentional, but just incredibly disrespectful. And I mean that as a compliment. I loved it. The Mizzou game, I don't know. Like, I am far past the point of getting really worked up either way about any Mizzou game, because they're quite meaningless at this point, other than just another notch in either the win or loss column that we'll revisit at the end of the year. But it felt to me like a bit of a relapse, and I know you touched on that a little bit in your post-game thoughts. It was like watching a game from a couple months ago where they settled for a bunch of threes that they of course didn't make. Foul trouble for Kobe Brown was an issue, and like they hung in there, but ultimately, I don't know, they were an 8-point underdog. They lost by 8. They, for most of the game, you'd say Vandy was the better team. It was just kind of blah.
Right, and the problem is being an 8-point underdog to Vandy. So I would like to – I'm not going to name the player here because I feel like that's disrespectful, but there was a running joke on Press Row last year that if this guy shoots a 3 in a game, he should have a hand chopped off. And if he shoots a second 3 in a game, he should have his other hand chopped off. And then he only can shoot 2 threes. Like he's not going to shoot any more threes after that. So would it be going too far to just chop all of their hands off so that they cannot shoot a 3? Would that be extreme in your opinion?
No, I mean, I think it makes sense. It would make it also harder to shoot 2s, which is an issue. I mean, they generally play basketball, but it might be worth it. I mean, at least make an example. And honestly, I will say this: like Konzo was definitely a little more critical after the game than I've seen him in a while. Usually after games, it's just like, tough one. We'll learn the lesson. We'll get better. Thought we did some good things, not enough. He was pretty upset last night, basically saying, we said coming in, we need to not settle for 3s, and they just settled and took comfortable shots in the first 5-7 minutes, set the tone, and were never able to really get going and attack. And, he basically said, if you're not going to execute the offense, your playing time will be affected. And that was, I think, a not so subtle hint at the point guard who didn't play at all in the second half. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not absolving him from blame by any means, but I do think it's one of these things where, you can get to a point in the year and it's like, I don't know if guys kind of tune it out. I don't know if, because Vanderbilt plays defense in a way with their big guys that it was just easier to shoot 3s, what happened. But clearly that was not the plan going in.
When I was most upset in that game, and I could be wrong on who it was. I think it was Ronnie DeGray that made the first one, but I don't know. But basically, when Missouri went from 0 for 15 from 3-point range to 1 for 16, I was actually I legitimately wanted 0 for 22. I was rooting for that at that point because it's not like 5 for 25 ended up winning you the game anyway.
Right.
0 for 22 would be cool. 5 for 25 is just bad.
Yes, yeah, it was bad. And also, I will say too, and I get that they shouldn't have settled for so many shots, but a lot of them they were not hard shots. They were open shots that most college basketball players should make. But on this team, that still doesn't mean it's a good shot. We've seen that these guys aren't great shooters. By the way, when I was most mad last night was Mizzou did hit that last 3, that corner 3, to make the score 68-62, which was my exact prediction for the game. I've never gotten one of these right. And then they fouled with 9 seconds left to let Vanderbilt shoot free throws. So I would not be super upset if Deshaun Gordon got his scholarship pulled, because I think he was the one who fouled.
That seems – I want to say that seems extreme, but I'm talking about cutting the whole team's hands off. So your solution seems a little bit better to me. So, okay, I'm going to need you to play Google Translate here. here for me. I'm going to put a comment up on the board, and I'm just going to read it sentence by sentence, and I'm going to need you to explain to me exactly what it means here. So, what candy game in person last night? Are we assuming that means watched Vandy game in person?
That's my guess, yeah.
They are really baby. You got anything here?
They are really bad?
That's probably fair. And yes, they cannot shoot threes. 100% agree. That needs no translation. That is true in every angle. Just some showboating and didn't work. I don't know. Was there showboating in that game last night?
I missed it. There was nothing entertaining. I'll say that. Showboating, I feel like, supposed to be entertaining.
I think he just tells them to play street ball. First of all, I think he doesn't tell them to do that. Second of all, I think we're kind of making some. I think we could get into some stereotypical areas that we don't need to get into. Did come back. I assume he's talking about the team, but maybe he means he came back. Maybe Mr. Mizzou Fly 1950 came back.
Yeah, hopefully he did come back if he went to the game or. Yeah, went to game in person. You watched game in person, yeah. So maybe he just lives at Vandy now. I don't know. I mean, those are if we're interpreting it right, those are all observations. Some of which I agree with, some of which maybe not. They are indeed bad at threes. They did come back. The game was not super entertaining, and I don't know. The street ball thing. I think the coach is trying. He benched his starting point guard for the whole second half in favor of a true freshman. But again, then it's very easy to then say, in college, well, he recruited those guys, so it's still his fault. And I can't really argue with that.
Right. It's all, he's the head coach, he's the GM, he's the president, he's the owner. Well, he's not the owner, but all of that. We get it. It was not great. It just was another game that happened and went kind of the way we thought it was going to go. Todd Julian says Caleb Brown looked quicker than I thought he'd be. He has to play even though he isn't ready yet. And somebody asked me about Caleb Brown in the mailbag, and I want to be kind of careful here, but he is better as a freshman than I thought he would be. I think it's fair to say he might be the best point guard on this team, right?
Yeah, probably, yeah. I still kind of think Boogie Coleman is a better college player right now if he could play the position he's meant to be playing. But yes, if you're talking about who's the best point guard, I would take Caleb Brown.
Now, that said, is Caleb Brown a starting point guard on a team in the SEC that competes for an NCAA tournament bid? No.
Not freshman, not true freshman Caleb Brown, no.
Right, and I'm not sure junior Caleb, maybe. We'll see where he is in 2 years, but it's kind of like I think if Missouri was a good team, Kobe Brown wouldn't have a bunch of 30 and 15 games. Somebody has to. If on a good team, Kobe Brown is the third or fourth offensive option, and there's no shame in that. If he's your clear number one option on offense, you're kind of in trouble, kind of like we saw with Tyler Beatty in the football season this year. Yeah, Tyler Beatty had a really good year, and I don't want to take away from that, but he partly had a good year because the offense was getting the ball back every 12 seconds because the defense was giving up a score, and oh, by the way, they didn't really throw it very well, so that was the way they moved the ball, So kind of like Kim Anderson said a few years ago, somebody's got to score the points. So I think, Caleb Brown looks a little bit better than I thought he would look, but he's not at all an offensive threat at this point. I think he's got 15 assists in 155 minutes, which is fine, but it says more about the rest of the position, I think, than it.
Yeah, that's my thing with him is, he does play with more control than any of the other point guards, and he does a decent job of distributing the ball and not turning it over, but he is not a scoring threat at all. And when you're talking about a team that, it's not like he's surrounded by a bunch of other guys who are, and he just has to dish it to him. You're talking about a team that also, at the other positions, doesn't have a lot of scoring threats. That can be an issue.
Yeah. Keegan wants to know if you would be the best three-point shooter on Missouri's team.
Well, he says, where would I rank? And so I actually saw that, and I've pulled up the stats, the 3-point percentages. I'm putting myself right squarely between Anton Brookshire at 15% and Jordan Wilmore at 0% for 11th best, or no, 12th best.
So you would be above somebody.
Yes, I would be. I think I would be ahead of 0%.
Do you know, and you may know this now because you said you were looking at the stats, do you know who Missouri's best three-point shooter is by the
It's
numbers?
Trevin Brazil at 35%.
That is not phenomenal. Let's just be
Yeah.
honest. All right, Konzo is going to Willie Mays Hayes his players if they shoot a three, drop down and do 25 push-ups right there on the floor. I kind of like that. Like if you shoot a three, even if it goes in, as the Willie Mays Hayes hit a ball in the air and had to do push-ups in the batter's box. I like that. If you are a Missouri player that shoots a three, you do 25 push-ups while the other team goes the other way 5-on-4.
Yeah, I like it even better actually if you just because basketball it's harder than baseball. You can't you impact the next play if you just stop. I say like take them out of the game and at the next media timeout they're doing it on the floor and like the whole arena can chant as they're doing it like they do when the mascot does the push-ups just to score or however many push-ups the team has scored in football or whatever. I think that's every media timeout we're going to see a Mizzou player doing push-ups if they shoot a three.
Okay, now we rarely have like breaking news here on the 573 report, but I think it's possible here. We're at least going to have to do a quick Google search after the show because Christopher Turner says, I was looking at Konzo's contract the other day, and there is a clause about how the buyout is 50% less if Sturk got fired by a certain date. I'll be honest, I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I just know nothing about this. I'm going to have to go look.
Yeah, I've read the contract, but it's been a little while. That like vaguely rings a bell. It seems to me like it would be that what Konzo owes is 50% less if Jim Sturk is gone, not what Mizzou owes him. That's just a guess. We'll definitely look into that though.
Michael wants to know, will Drink get a DC or does he already have one? Like we think Blake Baker is going to get promoted. We don't know that for sure. Did Wingo know about the change in left? That is, you're galaxy braining that one a little bit, Michael. No, I mean, that was a month ago. And no, this is.
And Drinkwitz said that Wilks was in the, meetings. He was interviewing the new defensive assistants like 2 weeks ago. So.
And Keegan clarifies that contract is if Konzo's leaving for another job, not if it's Missouri's decision. So that saved us a Google search. That is good. Cam says down 8 had a lineup of Caleb, Gordon, Pickett, DeGray, and Brazil, a brutal offensive group. But like, I don't know what's the good offense. Like Kobe Brown's on the floor with this team.
Exactly.
But other than that, what's good?
Exactly. Yeah, it's not like those. I mean, like those aren't your worst players. It's just missing Kobe Brown, who was in foul trouble. So yeah, no, I think the issue is just the lack of talented scorers on the roster.
Right. I mean, you could argue, okay, Kobe Brown fouled out, so he's not eligible to be in. I guess you could argue Boogie Coleman over Gordon makes that a better. But Anton Brookshire's not helping it. Yaya Keita's not helping it. Jordan Wilmore's not helping it.
I mean, Davis can score. Sometimes, but he's also very streaky. I mean, when he's off, he's off.
So overall, like it's just, again, we are spending so much time looking for 8 million different. They just don't have enough talent, and that's on the coach. And I'm not removing blame for that from the coach, but they just haven't recruited well enough in the last 4 years to be a good team, and we'll see where that goes. So I figured it would mostly be Steve Wilks in basketball. I don't know, Mitch. Is there anything else that like we should talk about?
Not really. I can't think of anything else. There's another basketball game Saturday. I know that. I'm sure we'll get to that point when we get there. But yeah, no, that's all I got.
I'm a little disappointed at the 7:30 start time. I'm hoping maybe we get a snowstorm that moves it up to 2, but it's supposed to be like 50 degrees, so I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't like your chances on that one.
All right, well, thanks for hanging out. I know you got a big radio doings and such, and I got to go talk to Mookie Cooper. So we'll do all that and talk to you another time.
Sounds good.
All right, that is Mitchell Forde. I am Gabe DeArmond. This has been the 573 Report, brought to you by 573 Tees in downtown Columbia, on the internet at 573tees.com. You can check them out, get anything that you need to get, Mizzou-related, Chiefs, Cardinals, Blues, anything else. Check them out and tell them that Power Mizzou sent you. You heard about it on this show. We would appreciate it. Before you leave this little online chat room here, Please hit the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're listening on the podcast, which I will post momentarily. We would appreciate it if you would leave a nice review. I think they do stars and such on the podcast apps, so do that. Much appreciated. We will be back next Wednesday on the 573 Report. Thanks for watching.